almost more camaraderie than you do if you're stationed kind of here in the US and everyone can kind of go to their own homes, right? Like people are tending to go to the same places on base or the same places off base, and you build such a strong and close-knit community. And then the type of work that we're doing, you've got a strong sense of community. I would sometimes be on a plane flying around with folks for 8 to sometimes 12 hours, right? So you get to know people really, really well. Similar, to my workday here, but I would say that sense of kind of having to figure it out yourself was one of the biggest differences and one of the things hardest to get used to. I would also say that the sense of teamwork in the military is very absolute. Like it's just a given. We all know that we're going to just keep doing what we need to do until it's done. And I do feel like it took a second to acclimatize to just different views of what our mission was. Maybe that's the right way to say it.
Yeah.
I think in the military we're all pretty centrally focused on what our mission is, and I think once you get into corporate America, you realize that there's different ways that that's defined. You have to understand what the strategy and goals are of your particular group. You have to see how those align to like the bigger strategy and goals, right? Like there's a lot of different things that are happening that I think are a little bit different for a service member when they're transitioning.
And how about that immediate jump from the service to Columbia for business school? What challenges were there to try to either get back into the classroom, but just be back in the classroom this time with civilians versus fellow service members?
Yeah, so it's very different. I was now going to school in the middle of New York City, and I was going to school with people who had, a lot of them had come from finance, so they had been on a certain track, so they had a complete understanding of things that I just didn't have the same level of understanding. Quite honestly, I made a good living as a lieutenant in the Navy, but I probably made a third of what people around me had made in their civilian careers, right? So just even understanding, things about people's work experiences were very interesting. And, I think as most military members, we're not, there's no 4 seasons on the base where you're staying, right? Like you kind of have to make do. And it definitely felt like there were amazing opportunities and standards available in the civilian world that people still seemed unhappy with those things. And so it took a second to be like, oh, you got your bonus wasn't high enough. Okay. Wow, you got a bonus? Like what? I don't understand. So I will say that I did have a saving grace. Just by sheer chance, my next door neighbor, his name was Scott Belleville, was a West Point grad. And we found each other clearly because, the military folks kind of, I think, sort of found each other the first couple of days. And then we happened to live next door to each other. And so it was actually really nice to break up that solitary feeling with someone who actually understood like what you were feeling. And so that was really helpful. And I know for a fact that Columbia, as do many business schools, enjoy having military people as part of the student body because of all that we bring and the different experiences. And so it's not hard to find the other military people. And I think those organizations are even more robust now. So I feel like that's a great way to combat some of that solitary feeling. But it was an interesting jump.
And probably a good piece of advice for other service members making that same jump from service to a college campus again. Well, tell me about your career. Once you left Columbia, you must have at that point kind of zeroed in on what you wanted to do. What was what was your first step in finding that civilian job, and what was that experience like?
Yeah. So for me, I think one of the great things about a graduate degree, and specifically business school, is that opportunity to have an internship during the education. So whether you do 2 years and you do it over the summer, or you do an 18-month program and you figure it out over the winter, that was a great way to actually get to know a company and for a company to get to know you. And so I was fortunate enough to get an offer from Goldman Sachs after my summer and go work there full time. So my decision out of business school was to work in wealth management. And basically, the thing that I found was that I was very used to a track. The military, you know, I knew I was going to be a cryptologic officer. There were certain billets that made sense, right? And then as you were going on in your career, other things made sense. And so, you know, corporate environment is just different than that, right? There's jobs that have functional expertise, and it's about kind of building up those skills and that expertise. And so as I entered wealth management, I started to, like, you know, dig into the job of being a financial advisor. And what I was finding was that there were pieces of the job that I really enjoyed. And it was about kind of digging in deep on investments and being a subject matter expert. And that was actually like a bit of a different path than what I had originally signed up for. And so, you know, I kind of spent the beginning of my career thinking through, you know, transitioning to all the facets, you know, the other things that are available in finance. And that was probably my first huge lesson, was that while we say finance, there are so many different avenues in finance that, you know, if you ever read the Wall Street Journal and they'll say the word, like, you know, interest rates, and then they'll give the definition of what happens between prices and interest rates. And it's because everybody works in such different places that someone may not actually know that. And once I got over the idea that I didn't need to stick the landing on my first role, and that if I had interest in something else, that there was like an ability to be fluid and sort of move through and just try to find the seat that I could excel in, that led me to moving, you know, the next financial services firm I worked at, I ended up being more of a specialist. And I think that actually is what set me on the rest of my career of being more focused, staying in wealth management, but really focused on investments, which has been super enriching and interesting. But for business school, the internships are kind of the easiest and most helpful way of getting into your hoped for industry.
So what was that second step when you made that kind of career pivot? Where did you go next?
So I started out in wealth management as an advisor. I actually took a bit of a hiatus from finance and went to go work at a startup. And not sort of the high flyer, but this was really about a roll up of different businesses. Because I think as military people, a lot of us think we're going to come out and probably run like a large group or a company. Like, we're just kind of wired to do certain things like that. And so I love this idea of the entrepreneurial endeavors, which is a lot like why I liked wealth management, because it really is a bit of your own business as you talk to clients and help them through issues and all of that good stuff. And so I actually, for a bit, went to go work at a startup, and I realized that there was a rigor that I had found in financial services that I was actually missing. And so at this point, I'd been out for a number of years, but, you know, building up a network is super important. Once you realize how solitary it can be when you first get out, you have to make that real effort to try to keep in contact with people, get to know people, because this is what ends up leading to different opportunities. And so in talking to someone, found out that there was an opportunity at another firm. And so I kind of went down that road. And since I had experience on one side of our business and understanding more of the sales aspect of it, it was actually helpful to say, like, hey, I actually want to do kind of the guts of the work now and help those people, you know, win business and all of that. And so it's interesting. I think sometimes we want careers to be perfectly straight and linear, and to have a little bit of what we sort of expected in the what we experienced probably a little bit more in the military. And a lot of people in the civilian world kind of expect it too. You know, it's always supposed to go up, 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 and I'm always supposed to get the next bigger job. But I think what I have found is that as long as there is a consistent thread in some of these roles, it actually makes for more interesting experience and a richer career to be able to do some of these pivots.
Well, you've worked in this industry for almost 2 decades now. How different is it for a woman entering, or a woman veteran in particular, entering the financial services industry now compared to when you started out?
Oh, so I would say the big difference is that there is a much larger network of people that you can reach out to, that you can be supported by, that you can learn from. I think companies have taken huge steps. And quite honestly, JPMorgan kind of leading the charge almost 10 years ago. It'll be 10 years next year, marking our whole veterans job initiative and saying, you know, I think we have over 200 partners now who say, like, we're committed to hiring veterans and creating those like outreach points. And that is very different. Before it was very much like, who did you know? Could you be, you know, and people were happy to meet with you, but it was a much smaller group. We were so used to moving in cohorts in the military. There is no cohort when you get out, right? But I would say the difference now is you've got much more welcoming companies. And then once you get inside, right, then there's even a lot more. We've got you know, sort of buddy systems, mentorship programs, people that will like stick with you for a year and answer your questions and help you through that whole idea of being able to get kind of comfortable in companies. That is very different than when I got out.
And do you feel, if there was a glass ceiling for women, that that has been removed? Or is we still pounding up against it?
You know, I think that we're always trying to make sure that we're able to do, similar in the military, that we're able to do sort of all the things that we're capable of. And I think that there's parity in corporate America? No. Do I think that there's parity in the military? No, right? Like we're always striving, and I think that's probably one of the best things about this country, and sort of the spirit that most people approach these things at, is that we're a lot more aware of the ways that some of those inequities exist. And I think we're trying to actually address them in ways that are more meaningful, rather than potentially just kind of talking about it. So
What are some of the biggest challenges you faced in your career?
yeah, so I think, you know, I think you mentioned it before about being able to kind of come out and learn all sorts of different things. I think one of the things as a veteran, I've always felt is very teachable, right? I've been very teachable because we come in, no one knows anything about artillery or, you know, how to drive a ship. And at the end of some sort of training, you're clearly able to do those things. And I think it can be a bit overwhelming for people who are used to operating at a very high level and having responsibility at a very young age, to be able to come into a situation where you actually don't know anything, and that it's actually okay. And that the expectation is that you will ask questions, because of course you don't know how to originate derivatives. Like, that's why you're on the desk, and that's why we're going to teach you. And so that was a big mental shift, I'll be honest, to know that the questions were not a sign of weakness, but actually expected. And I would also say transitioning can be challenging, because in those moments when you're trying to figure things out and trying to be ready to go and trying to be, you know, one of the strongest links in the chain, you know, you're very internally focused, trying to think through things that you're hearing in meetings, trying to put pieces together. And sometimes you're also deferring to the de facto like hierarchy that exists. And in a lot of corporate environments, the desire is for you to like jump in and potentially like disrupt things, or the expectation is that you're pointing out those things. And I've just watched a lot, and I know that I did it myself. I've watched a lot of veterans kind of hang back a little, because we sort of instinctively find the most senior person in the room, and we want to kind of
For sure.
follow
Yeah.
follow that lead, because we're like, okay, that must be the way that we're going. And a lot of times the corporate environment wants you to challenge that and just make sure that that's okay. And so those are probably a couple of the things that were most challenging, even though you're very capable, that whole concept of not knowing and having it be okay, and actually pointing out things that are maybe not where they should be, and knowing that that's okay too.
And talk about a little bit about your current job, what you do, and how it fits into the big picture of JP Morgan.
Sure. So just a year ago, I actually pivoted again to a new role. So I had spent uh, almost 2 decades doing wealth management, talking to our clients about investments, helping them think about their generational wealth, and it was really a fantastic job. And I mentioned before that I was always very interested in kind of this entrepreneurial type role. And so what I do now is I help transform our advisors' platform and the tools that they have available to them. And the reason that this feels so entrepreneurial to me is it's really the intersection of thinking strategically about what does transformation actually mean, and matching that up with the business goals, creating a vision around the digital tools that I'm actually building, working with cross-functional teams, leading this effort. It's just been like a joy. It's been so much fun over the past year. And I never thought that I would work in finance and that my next pivot would move me closer to the technology realm. But it's been truly fascinating to understand software development. I'm kind of a geek at heart, so I love the idea of trying to learn Python and understanding how AI and machine learning can actually help us meet our business goals in a new way. So in the bigger picture of JP Morgan, it's a really fun role, because what I do essentially is I act as the go-between between the businesses that are trying to achieve their strategic goals and the technology teams that have the expertise and the know-how to build the tools that will help them reach those goals. And so it's really nice to learn a new language and speak an old language in a new way.
And what advice do you have for other women veterans looking to enter the financial services industry? Is an MBA a must, or what should they be doing?
Yeah, I actually don't think an MBA is a must. I think that if it's of interest to you, you should absolutely explore it. There are fantastic programs all over the country with different specialties. So make sure that you're looking at a school if you have a particular specialty, like a desire to learn more about marketing, or any particular subset, that you're really doing your research and seeing if that's actually what you want to do. But I would honestly say, for women who are getting out, LinkedIn is probably the best thing that has been created in the last couple of decades, because you have such a wealth of access, and anybody's willing to chat with you for 20 minutes about what they've done, and to help you kind of think through how you may want to do some transitioning yourself.
So basically, reach out, use LinkedIn to connect with people essentially who are potentially in a job you might want to do.
Absolutely. I think that's great. And honestly, I would even say it, you don't even have to be connected, right? Because you really just have to reach out, and I think you can cover more ground that way. And once you actually get to know somebody, they have the opportunity to potentially connect you to other people and have it be more meaningful that way. Sometimes I'm fearful that people want to get as many connections as possible, but they don't necessarily use them.
Yeah. And looking back at your career, what have been the keys to your success, and how does the military play in that?
Yeah. So how do you even articulate all that the military taught me? I remember when I was during plebe summer, we had to call our parents every weekend. So you know how old I am. We didn't have cell phones, and every weekend my mother would be like, "Do you want to come home? You can come home if you want to come home. I have great parents." And I remember saying like, "Nope, I'm staying. I'm not leaving." And there's something about that spirit that the military instilled in me, that if I set out to do something, I was going to do it. And what it also taught me when I didn't achieve a goal was that failure is not fatal. And those are two really important things, I think, that drive me. So I'm not afraid to try something. And if I'm going to try it, I'm going to try to just knock it out of the park. And that means that anything that's new and different, right? Like I've never built a digital tool before. I don't know how to code in Python, but I wasn't afraid of leading a team and trying to just flex some new muscles. But I have known failure before, and it was not fun the first time on large scale. But what I did learn from it is that you just pick yourself up and you keep going because there's something you learned from it. And so I think that that's one thing that I have learned over time in my career, is that sometimes it's okay to let go of something. You've got to do that kind of risk assessment and say, maybe this situation is a situation where I've learned all that I can, and I need to kind of move on to my next battle. And so those are probably two of the most important things that I think the military taught me.
You're also quite involved with the Mission Continues.
Mm-hmm.
How important do you think it is for military veterans to stay connected in some way, or find that thing that motivates them and gives back to their own community?
I think it's vital. It's absolutely vital. I now chair the board of the Mission Continues. I've been involved for 7 years now. And the thing that I actually love about the Mission Continues is that sense of connection. And we've even put some data and some real science behind it in creating the Empowered Veteran Index, where we're measuring all of those things around, happiness, health, wellness, because it is so important that a group of people who have such purpose that their desire is to serve their country, right? Like,
yeah,
that's what you go into it for. You don't go in for any prizes. You go in with a real servant heart. And so to have that sense of purpose, and then to not continue to harness that sense of purpose, is like taking the air away, right? And so being able to have vets be able to rally around their own communities, and coming back from deployments, maybe not having been connected with veterans for a very long time if they've been out for a while, and be able to take that same purpose and put it in their communities, have their communities get to know them, which is huge to get that sense of connection, and then build an entirely new cohort of veterans around them who can be helpful. And I've just watched it just change people's lives. And so that's why I think it's just so vital.
Mm. Is there anything else you'd like to mention that we haven't touched on?
Let's see. You know what I would say though? I would say, kind of going back to your question about like how much has changed, I would say with the amount of companies that do focus on veterans, it really makes sense to make sure that you include at least a few of those companies in your transition search. Because you do want to go to a place that at least has thought through some sense of structure around the fact that you're coming. And if nothing else, has a group of people that will be there to welcome you and will try to translate your experience. So that's why, I would say, of course, JPMorgan does that. Like I said, there's over 200 companies that do that. That's super important. But reach out, right? Don't be shy. Don't be shy because you don't know how this is going to work out. Reach out to anyone that you can find, and honestly, just ask them about their experience and get the good, bad, and the ugly, so that you're prepared when something happens, not to feel like it's only you. You'll be like, oh yeah, they mentioned that. And so that would be my biggest, maybe 2 pieces of advice.
Yeah, so really looking for that quote unquote military friendly company, because that does bring some things of value to the veteran.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I think the other thing you mentioned that I found interesting that I believe people overlook is just how many jobs and different types of jobs there are in the financial services industry. It sounds like even coming out with your MBA, you still were surprised by all the avenues that were open to you.
It is unbelievable. There are, people who work in financial services that do not work with numbers. They do not work with investments. They work on cybersecurity. to keep our accounts safe,
Yeah.
our client accounts safe. We spend like billions of dollars at JPMorgan alone. So you could come in and be a software developer at a financial services firm that wants to solve like really interesting, complex problems. You could work on blockchain. You can work in strategy. You can work in corporate finance, right? Like more of a treasury or an accounting type function. You don't have to do the jobs that you see in the movies that you're like, oh my gosh, I could never be a trader or an investment banker. That doesn't suit me. There are so many different options in financial services. You could be in marketing. It's really, really fascinating to know. That's why it's so important to reach out to people and, search by company. Search by company before you search by job title, right? Because you may end up getting drawn to the same type of person over and over again. But if you say like, wonder all these people who are veterans at Morgan Stanley or JPMorgan, like, what do they do? That's where you'll start learning all the diversity.
And is that particularly true for a woman veteran to understand, to not pigeon herself into some preconceived notion of what avenues and opportunities are available to her?
Yes, I think 1,000%, because I think what you'll see happen, and we see this with non-veteran women, but so I would, definitely for veteran women, and I know I had a little bit of apprehension about this myself, is the assumption that all of these jobs are so market focused. And if you don't understand everything they're saying on one of the financial networks, that somehow you're not going to be able to be successful. If you're not reading the Wall Street Journal or Barron's all the time, that you're not going to be successful. And that is absolutely untrue. Every single job has some level of training, because the expectation is that we do something that is highly value added for our clients. And whether as our client, you are a country, a company, or a person, that highly value added offering is going to require some level of training.
Yeah.
And so especially the woman veteran shouldn't think that they don't have what it takes to be one of those people that's delivering that for clients or customers at a company.
Well, excellent. Well, thank you so very much for your time. I appreciate it. And if I have any other follow-up questions, I'll probably shoot you an email and get clarification on anything, or an added question, bonus question thrown in.
No
I
problem.
appreciate your time, and I thank you. I did notice I hit the record button a little late on this, unfortunately, but there's still a good probably 30 minutes that they'll have to work with. But yeah, it was a pleasure speaking with you.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Yeah, no problem. Come back if you need anything.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.